Good day, I'm Jessica Allen and I'm a climate change and environmental consultant at C4 EcoSolutions. We are a consultancy based in Cape Town with over a decade of experience in developing climate change and adaptation projects for major funds all over the world. But there's a very exciting opportunity which falls within our own country to not only contribute to climate change mitigation through the restoration of highly productive landscapes, but to improve the resilience and well-being of some of the country's most vulnerable populations. Our CEO, Anthony Mills, has spent more than 20 years conducting research in the thickets of the Eastern Cape. Today I intend to present some key figures which highlight the opportunities offered in this unique landscape. As of 2019, the Eastern Cape province recorded the highest unemployment rate in the country at approximately 38%. Job losses in October to December 2019 were recorded across most large sectors in the country, and unemployment has risen since 2017. Nationally, tens of thousands of jobs have been lost, and this has been exacerbated by the current COVID-19 pandemic. The effects of rising unemployment as well as the COVID-19 pandemic have already been felt in this vulnerable province and will continue to be felt in the years to come. Creating new jobs, income streams and livelihoods, particularly for poor, unskilled workers, is an urgent priority for the South African government. The Department of Environmental Affairs has estimated that there is an opportunity to create up to 140,000 jobs for poor rural South African communities through the restoration of natural ecosystems. Some of the most exciting opportunities for restoration are based in the Albany thicket biome of the Eastern Cape. The thicket biome, shown in this map, covers approximately 32,000 square kilometres, mostly in the Eastern Cape. This amounts to about 2.2% of the South African land area. This biome has evolved across a highly complex landscape and has very high biodiversity. Most of the Eastern Cape thickets fall within the Maputoland-Pondoland Albany hotspot, recognised internationally as an area of remarkably high biodiversity. Thickets can typically be described as a closed canopy vegetation, consisting of an impenetrable tangle of shrubs and low trees, usually interspersed with climbing plants. And as anyone who's worked in thicket areas can attest, the word impenetrable is the key word in this case. As well as high biodiversity and a wide range of ecosystem services offered by the thickets, it is a potential for carbon sequestration, which has caught the attention of the international community in recent years. Much of this potential has been accredited to a single plant species. Portulacaria afra, better known as speckworm, is a plant species native to the Eastern Cape. It is a succulent tree which is adapted to grow in this semi-arid climate. In the last decade, the awareness of speckworm as an integral component of large-scale restoration of degraded land has grown considerably. It can grow in semi-arid to fairly arid environments on rocky slopes or wet valleys, and it can tolerate very high temperatures. It is an important pioneer species for intact thicket, forming dense stands which then provide a cooler and more favourable environment for the recruitment of other thicket species. Speckworm plays an essential role in primary productivity as well as secondary productivity, increasing soil organic carbon and providing areas for livestock grazing and browsing, and also supporting large populations of wild animals. How much carbon can speckworm sequester? Studies have indicated between 4 and 15 tons of carbon dioxide per hectare annually within its natural range. Of course, there is some variation depending on the location that you are measuring this in, as well as rainfall and other factors. But nonetheless, this is a remarkably high sequestration rate given the aridity of its environment and the harshness of its environment. However, it is estimated that more than 1 million hectares of thicket have been degraded predominantly by the grazing of goats. Thickets, and speckworm in particular, have evolved alongside megaherbivores such as elephants, and their productivity is dependent to a degree on disturbance caused by browsing. But they are not adapted to the browsing habits of goats, particularly at the high stocking densities which have been used across this landscape for decades. This map illustrates the extent of degradation across the thicket biome in those vegetation types which have speckworm as a dominant component. Not all those vegetation types within the thicket biome do have speckworm as a dominant component, so areas like Noordsveld will have almost no speckworm. So this map just shows those in which speckworm is a dominant component. As you can see, more than 600,000 hectares are now classified as moderately degraded, and more than 590,000 hectares have been severely degraded. Since 2014, the Natural Resource Management Program run by the Department of Environmental Affairs has invested more than $10 million into thicket restoration. But to date, approximately 1% of the degraded land available has been restored. There is scope for the restoration of more than 1 million hectares of thicket in the Eastern Cape. To achieve restoration over 1 million hectares, annual investments of $150 million will be needed over 5 years. Over a 50-year period, this investment is expected to deliver a 10% return on investment. This return will be realized through increased stock productivity, the expansion of beekeeping, generation of water, as well as the sequestration of carbon, amongst others. Let us take a brief look at the benefits of thicket restoration for a few important commodities which are produced in the Eastern Cape. Foremost amongst these is mohair, as well as other goat-derived products. South Africa is the world's largest producer of mohair, and the Eastern Cape is the largest producer of mohair in the country. In 2014, there were approximately 644,000 goats in South Africa, producing about 2 million kilograms of mohair fleece annually. The gross value of mohair production in 2015 is estimated at 529 million rand. The restoration of degraded thickets and improving sustainable land management practices could safeguard mohair supply to international and national markets by alleviating the pressure that land degradation and droughts have caused for the sector. The Eastern Cape has been particularly hard hit by droughts, which have affected the production of mohair. And although mohair production is seasonal, restored thickets can counteract the negative impacts of drought and extreme temperatures, to which these goats are fairly vulnerable. So intact thickets can provide forage during dry season, which is an important backup, as well as protect shorn goats from high temperatures and winds during cold periods. So all in all, a restored thicket can safeguard and improve employment opportunities in the mohair sector during droughts as well as colder periods, protect the goats and result in a better product. Moving away slightly from mohair, the Eastern Cape province produces the largest number of goats in South Africa, about 38% of total production. Between 2007 and 2017, the average gross value of goat production in Africa was about 363 million rand per year. Some work needs to be done to improve consumer knowledge of goat meat, but there is a potential to increase this industry considerably, but that does depend on the production of high quality meat. Now, the quality of goat meat is largely dependent on the body condition and health of the goats before slaughter, which is partly dependent on available fodder. Restored speckworm can facilitate the growth of other varied plant thicket species, which, along with speckworm itself, provide a sustainable and sufficient supply of bulk quality feed for goats. It is a highly nutritious plant. Now, although speckworm, as we've said, is not adapted to goat browsing, its nutritional value and palatability does increase with a certain degree of defoliation from browsing. So a rotational grazing system with goats stocked at 65% or less of the ecological carrying capacity and browsing at a low intensity can ensure a complementary relationship between sustainable speckworm and goat production. And there are some guidelines available as to what constitutes a productive rotational grazing system with regards to thicket and goats. Currently, the stocking rate that is recommended is 0.3 SSU per hectare per year. So stepping back from goats to take a broader view, the productivity of livestock animals is dependent on numerous variables, and this includes forage availability, the nutritive quality of that forage, distance to water, and ambient temperature. Under climate change, climatic conditions are expected to become a lot more variable, and the frequency and intensity of droughts is expected to increase. Although land degradation can be addressed through the provision of supplementary feeding, drought conditions do exacerbate the limitations of forage availability and compromise the digestibility of available forage. Not to mention that supplementary feeding can be prohibitively expensive, particularly for small-scale producers. Because arid and semi-arid regions like the Eastern Cape are becoming more susceptible to frequent droughts, forage in degraded rangelands is depleted at a more rapid rate than forage in intact or restored thickets. The restoration of rangelands using speckworm, you can safeguard these rangelands from the severe effects of intense and frequent droughts while ensuring a sustained availability of forage and livestock productivity. Another important sector for the Eastern Cape, of course, is game farming and hunting. So since 1996, the Eastern Cape has experienced an increase in game-based farm operations. The hunting industry is well established and is a major destination for trophy hunters in South Africa. As of 2001, there were approximately 624 exempted game farms, covering an area of over 800,000 hectares in the Eastern Cape. And that's 2001, so this has grown considerably since then. Wild game farming has been shown to be a more sustainable land use practice than conventional farming. It has been considered to be less lucrative. But more recent analysis by the Wildlife Ranching South Africa have indicated that profits in game farming can be increased by combining trophy hunting and the production of processed meats, for example. And this could actually make game farming more profitable than traditional farming or livestock farming. So some of the common animals sold for trophy hunting on game farms in the Eastern Cape are kudu and bushbuck, both of which are indigenous to the region. They're well adapted to the thicket biome, they've evolved along with it, and are therefore unlikely to cause degradation unless they are stocked at unsustainably high levels. Since both kudu and bushbuck prefer sheltering and feeding in vegetation that enable good visibility at head height, the restoration of thickets provides an ideal habitat for these animals. So spec boom makes up about 25% and 40% of kudu and bushbuck diets respectively, and so the restoration of spec boom is essential in stocking these animals. It's difficult to put exact numbers to the potential for growth in the game farming and hunting industry, but in a best case scenario estimate, assuming 100% carrying capacity and the well-being of animals in terms of the area needed for feeding and social needs, if the entirety of the thicket biome were to be used for game farming, the maximum revenue generated from kudu hunting alone would amount to over $8 million per year, and this is shown in Table 1. A more conservative estimate, assuming a 50% carrying capacity on the already exempted existing game farms, amounts to $630,000 generated per year, again taking into account the well-being of kudus being farmed. For bushbuck, the best case scenario estimate of revenue generated would be $6 million per year, assuming 10,000 animals sold per year and the well-being of these animals in terms of feeding and social needs. So together, the revenue estimates for kudu and bushbuck trophy hunting assume that restored thicket vegetation is going to be used solely for that industry. But of course, there have to be decisions made about which income streams are preferable in terms of livestock versus game farming. But these can be combined, and this has been done in several areas in the thicket biome. Specboom can support a diverse array of animals. And the expansion of game farming as well as traditional livestock farming in the Eastern Cape provides an amazing opportunity for improved job security and the expansion of the job market in the Eastern Cape, where the unemployment rate is probably the second highest at a provincial level in South Africa at the moment. From the large to the rather small, beekeeping is an industry with great potential for expansion in the Eastern Cape. So bees provide direct and indirect services, and both of which are critical for many plant and animal life forms. So the main benefits associated with bees for human purposes include crop pollination, honey production, and other byproducts such as beeswax, which are widely used. The role of bees as pollinators is critical for food production. About 70% of agricultural crops rely on bees for pollination, and the depletion of pollinators around the world has sparked severe anxiety. The global phenomenon of colony collapse disorder is been linked to viruses, pesticides, drought conditions, and stress and poor nutrition caused by overworking of commercial bees. So pollinator deficits caused by colony collapse or the disappearance of bees off the landscape threatens food security. So strategic beekeeping and conservation management are important for overcoming pollination deficits and the associated negative effects for crop yields and food security. There are an estimated 60 beekeepers with a combined number of 3,350 hives in the Eastern Cape. But this is not enough to meet the demand, and bee products and services are currently considered to be underproduced. So due to the vital nature of pollination services for crop success, there is a real opportunity here for alternative livelihoods in beekeeping and pollination services. Over and above this, there is the potential for profit from honey. The annual gross value of honey equates to an average of 870 Rand per hive per year, and anecdotal evidence suggests that this could be doubled with the expansion of the industry. While honey is an important asset for consumer markets, the economic contribution of bee pollination services is even more important as this impacts crop yields, and an estimated 4.1 billion Rand is added to crop production through commercial bee pollination every year in South Africa. Now, the Eastern Cape has over 1 million hectares of degraded land available for restoration, and the potential for upscaling beekeeping and sustaining bees could equate to considerable economic gains in the form of pollination services as well as honey production. Now, there are several benefits for beekeepers, for conservation, and for economics related to the restoration of thicket. So intact thicket is associated with a high productivity of bees. It can serve as a wintering site, supporting commercial bees between crop seasons, for example, if you're using them for commercial pollination services. And of course could accommodate more bees with a more biodiverse landscape. The economic benefits associated with thicket restoration for beekeeping are considerable. So 11 hectares of intact thicket is able to support a single hive. Upscaling restoration to 1.5 million hectares could host an estimated 130,000 hives. For farmers, having wild bees near crop areas will provide pollination services as a free service rather than requiring commercial renting of bees. And with increased hives, there could be an increased annual potential for honey production amounting to over 117 million Rand in honey sales every year. So there is a lot of potential for restoration in the Eastern Cape. There are over 1 million hectares of degraded land which do need to be restored to improve productivity of various commodities. Large investments are needed, a lot of work is needed, and a lot of feet on the ground are needed, but the benefits that will be gained are considerable. So if we're looking at an investment period of over 5 years, these investments into restoration will create tens of thousands of jobs in the Eastern Cape and secure millions of dollars in benefits through livestock farming, through water generation, beekeeping, and carbon sequestration. Now, I've only discussed the livestock farming, beekeeping, and game farming in this presentation. There is much more to be gained in terms of water generation and carbon sequestration. So because unemployment is a massive concern for the Eastern Cape, let's look briefly at the benefits in terms of employment that restoration could generate. So the most obvious one is direct employment in restoration over the 5 years of investment that we specified. But while these jobs theoretically only last for 5 years, they will create a variety of other job opportunities within the Eastern Cape. These related and downstream job opportunities will result in reduced reliance on seasonal work and migration to other provinces, reduce the social burden, and improve household incomes for a variety of vulnerable communities. So these related jobs could include obviously the expansion of livestock, supportive businesses, sort of hardware, tool supplies, the production of protective clothing and equipment, small, large and medium enterprises could be built on the back of this restoration, given a more productive landscape. And there are also induced jobs, so in food and retail, required to support the restoration efforts. So there is a lot of opportunity within this landscape of the Eastern Cape. So what is being done currently? C4 EcoSolutions is currently investigating the opportunities within the Eastern Cape. We have partnered with the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. We're working with them. We are undertaking talks with government stakeholders and regional stakeholders. And the next step will be the assembly of task forces to undertake assessments for a rapid rollout of investment into restoration. But innovative funding instruments will be needed to create jobs rapidly in the private sector through the deployment of private sector service providers. So there are many opportunities, and we look forward to talking to many of you about the opportunities available in specific cases on the ground in the Eastern Cape. Thank you very much.